When I was a kid, I tried to write the novelization of The Bard's Tale 4. Not a real game, mind you, Bard's Tale 4. The Bard's Tale only had 3 entries back then. This crunchy, block-heavy dungeon crawler I played obsessively on my Apple IIe. But I was convinced that a 4th one, a follow-up to the classic Thief of Fate, should exist, and more importantly, that I should be the one to write it. I filled a spiral notebook with goblin ambushes and mysterious taverns and overwrought dialogue between my party of pixelated heroes. There was no ending. There might not have been a plot, but I was sure of one thing. If I could tell the story well enough, it would feel real. It would matter. I was 16. I think a lot about that version of me, the kid who didn't know you couldn't just write yourself into a universe and expect people to follow. Because here's the secret. Sometimes you can. Sometimes the worlds we build for fun end up being the ones that hold up. And sometimes the people who never stopped making things up, those are the ones who help the rest of us remember how. Kyle Olson is that kind of person. A writer by passion, a technologist by trade, and a podcaster because why not? Kyle spent his life spinning tales across genres and formats, from audio dramas like the entrancing Swashbuckling Ladies Debate Society to pop-up culture deep dives, TTRPG campaigns, and fanfics that travel under the nom de plume legible scrawl. His storytelling is prolific and joyful. Today, he's in the hot seat about legacy, not just the kind you leave behind, but the kind you build in real time, one character at a time, one voice at a time. On deck, I've got childhood obsessions, the magic of collaboration, and what it means to be a lifelong participant in the art of pretend. I'm Pete Wright, and this is Headstone. Kyle Olson, hello.
Prolific and joyful. That is absolutely perfect. That is everything that I have been going for, distilled down to 2 words.
I worked hard for that.
I can tell. It was one of the best intros I think I've ever had. So thank you already for that.
Well, you're welcome very much. It is well earned. As you know, but maybe others don't, I think very highly of you, Kyle Olson. I am supremely delighted to be in your orbit. And I'm glad that you have graced this humble show, these conversations about legacy, before it is even launched. Mm-hmm. That is a bit of risk and vulnerability on your part, and I don't take that lightly.
Well, you were kind enough to share the very first episode, so sort of the first cut of the first episode with me to sort of get my thoughts on it too, and I was honored by that already. I gave you a few notes. I thought Mambo number 5 was an odd choice for the theme, so I'm glad that did not end up materializing.
I see the kind of retconning we're doing already. I get it. That's good.
I mean, the cost alone would have been
it's extraordinary.
So much. But I thought it was actually really beautiful. Actually, it was really deep, interesting. And so my 2 thoughts were like, this is some really heavy stuff you're getting into, as opposed to sort of what you're more known for, which is talking about movies or talking about anxiety. Like, this is actually like a third area that you've never really gone into before. And second, man, I hope he doesn't ask me to be on it. Because it was, I looked at and I heard that the very first episode, which I'm sure everyone has listened to by this point, was so deeply emotional. And I always think of myself as wide but not deep. I am the reflecting pool in front of the Washington Monument. Like, many things, but don't get down deep into a lot of things. So I was like, oh man, and also having death as a thing. I've always thought of death being on a very wide orbit around me. Mm-hmm. So it's like it's never really come that close. And then so when you asked me to be on, and I was like, okay, I can do this. And then I was trying to think of what I would talk about. And then we had to reschedule, just because that is what life is like. Mm-hmm. And in the time that from when it originally scheduled till now, some things have happened.
Oh dear.
And you don't know any of these things yet, so you'll be experiencing them live as most of the people are. So it's been 20 years since I've been to a funeral until last week. So it's just one of those things. It was like my grandparents died when I was much younger, and no one around me. It's whatever, it's that far orbit, and unfortunately that comet has come home. I got a couple. I say this, but like 2 weeks ago, I got my sister had contacted me, and so he said they're taking Mark off of the machines. So I had an old boss. His name was Mark Gresco. He was in the Navy. He was the first person that hired me for a real adult job. So I had sort of entry level stuff before, but he was the first guy that saw something and gave me an office, gave me a salary, gave me areas of responsibility. He created this new role at the school district, and then thought I would be the one so I was the first person to have the title of mobile devices education coordinator, which doesn't really mean a whole lot, but it was a combination of duties. But and he was saw something in me and sort of gave me that shot. And we didn't always get along. He was kind of a bully. I had to really sort of push back on a lot of stuff too, and find a way to deal with someone. He was he could be really loud and up too, but and we sort of worked through it. Like he at the very start he would sort of threaten to fire me and things. It was not a very good situation, but I stayed and sort of worked through and worked with the team. And I think I had something to do with the fact that he then softened. He sort of understood that what he was doing was not working, was a negative thing. And by the time I left for another job, he was sad to see me go and wrote me a glowing letter of recommendation, which I have used on pretty much every job I've gotten from that point on. And even my last communication with him was about that, and then we started talking about what eventually got him, which is pancreatic cancer. He has been battling it for 5 years, and unfortunately, the cancer won.
Which is even still a long time, I believe, to be living with pancreatic cancer.
Yeah, and I'm a tall person, but he was even taller than I am. I'm a big person. He's even bigger than I was, so he was a giant in my eyes. And to sort of see what the cancer did to him was it was brutal. Like to see sort of someone that large brought that low.
You open hard, Kyle. You open hard.
On this show. I wish I could tell you this is the worst thing I'm going to talk about, but it isn't.
Well, okay. I mean, and the floor is yours.
Let's stop and breathe for a minute, though.
Yeah, I mean, the MacGuffin of this show, right, is that we look at the headstone as a moniker of the legacy we want to leave behind, the words on on others' mouths about us, as a way to evaluate whether the life that we lived was worth living, and really to celebrate that. You open with a story of somebody who was clearly important to you. Do you have a sense yet, or is it too soon, of the words that you would have put on Mark's headstone had it been your choice?
Well, that's interesting. He was in the military, so it was a military funeral. Mm-hmm. So he was been cremated, but his urn was there, and they had the soldiers in their dress whites come out and do taps and unfold the flag, and then fold it back and hand it to his wife. And he had 4 kids. He was 59, and the person who did his service said he'd never seen so many people come out to that funeral. In the 40 years of doing funerals, he'd never seen so many people. And it's true, there was probably over 100 of us outside in Arizona heat altogether. I mean, it kind of shows that it was more than just someone I worked with. and then the same thing would go for all of these people. Like I saw people that had worked for him and left and heard about this and came back just, to pay their respects.
Mm-hmm.
So you would think, hoping that there's something there, that it wasn't just time passed. It wasn't just by circumstances that you ended up with these, around there, but when you're gone, that they still think of you. So, words like leader and mentor and things come easily, but I think probably the ones he would more want would be husband, father. He had an odd eye for talent. He would find the strangest people, me being one of them, and bring them in to try and help them in some way. He found this poor girl who was incredibly shy and decided to make her the front office secretary, thinking he could bring her out of her shell or something, and it was just making her just miserable, having to constantly be talking to people in front of people and scheduling people. So his reasoning wasn't always impeccable, but yeah, it's say as I join you here, I'm still very much in the midst of it, so it's hard to have that perspective yet.
Of course. Well, I'm very sorry, and how do you transition from that into what comes next? You clearly have come with an agenda that is.
I have, because I have these, and that would be enough. I mean, obviously for a podcast, especially about legacy and death, that would be enough. But then, actually, so we have to go back in time for this one. So when I first got the job I have currently, they hired me to join a team of 4. So there were 4 guys, all about the same age. Remember, too, we all came in. They had been there for some 10, 15, 20 years. I was coming in as brand new, fresh-faced person.
Sure.
And it was, I sort of referred to them as the gang that couldn't shoot straight, because it turns out that they were a collection of people who never fit in anywhere else. And so they tried to make it work in this situation, and it didn't. So within 2 months, they fired 2 of the people, and it just became me and Eric. So Eric was a guy he's about 4 years older than me. He was also a nerd. We talked about classic stuff, Superman, the Incredible Hulk. For him, nothing came as good as the things that were from the 80s. He was also a curmudgeon, but he had a daughter who just started at college. And so we talked a lot about being the father of daughters and that kind of thing. So 3 Thursdays ago, I got the notification that Mark had died. 1 week earlier, I got the notification that Eric had died.
Jesus, Kyle.
2 subsequent weeks, 2 subsequent Thursdays, and then I went to the funeral of one on the Wednesday, and then 1 Wednesday later, I was at the funeral for the other one. So between the time that you asked me to be on the show, and I've been on the show, I went to 2 funerals that where I had not been to, of people who I knew. It wasn't a friend of a friend or a parent of a friend or anything like that. It was 2 people that I had worked with for Mark's case for 5 years, and for Eric's, it was just the 2 of us for the longest time. It was just he and I. Everything that came in was either him or me. The hurricane of grief has made landfall, and I'm still being blown around.
I'm really glad you opened this conversation with a refresher on your response to me upon the invitation, which is, I don't have anything to say. I'm shallow but very wide, and trying to toss me off a little bit, but I persist. Nevertheless, I persist as a podcaster. And so I ask you with complete awareness of the proximity to these events, how has this changed your view on your relationship with death?
Yeah, it's interesting, sort of as the as the paint is still being put on the canvas to be talked about. Yeah, it's one I've become, and maybe this is one I've looked through stages of grief and stuff too, and so maybe I'm still in the anger phase, but I'm so angry about the way that American culture deals with death. It's absolutely frustrating, and I know as talking to someone who has lost someone much closer to them than coworkers, I sort of tried to brush all this off in my last therapy session, and my therapist was kind of to say, like, these people were important to you, they were close to you. Like I was sort of playing it off as oh, this is just a trial run for the real ones that come later.
Yeah.
Like like as you've had to deal with. But she's like, no, that's not how emotions work.
Mm-hmm.
She said these kind of things, they're probably even more painful because these are the people who knew as you are.
Yes.
Like these people that you worked with and saw you day in, day out more than, sort of a parent or a sibling or whatever who you probably don't see very often. These are the people who knew you day in, day out, 40 hours a week for years sometimes. So to see both of them reduced to 25 minutes, that's the thing that's really got me right now, that really got me upset, is that's what you get. You get 25 minutes to sum up a life, and then into the ground, and we're off to eat.
Yeah.
It's absolutely enraging of like to try and to have, and both of them there were very different services and stuff too, and there's stories about there, but that's sort of not where we're talking about here. But I was so frustrated with how little they were present at their own funerals, how little they talked about what their lives were, what they had loved, what they had done, what was important to them. It was all about religion. It wasn't even, these even words of comfort. It wasn't even, I've had my own issues with religion, but there are beautiful passages in the Bible about heaven and about death and comfort, and none of them were used at either of these services. So you don't even have that. So it just made me so frustrated that there was so little of them in what ends up being the last chapter.
Yeah. There are stories of people who, usually celebrities, very, very wealthy people, who spend a lot of time preparing their own ceremony, their own service while they're still alive. And they're generally written off as crackpots, right?
Right.
And here you are experiencing exactly why they do what they do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because
and even
no one else clearly will do it.
Yeah, exactly. My wife has said, write it.
Yeah.
Write what you want. Write exactly what it is. I haven't gotten to that point yet, but I feel like that's coming to have it too, of like, I don't want anybody at my funeral in uncomfortable shoes.
That's really wise.
It's just what these things, it's like, sure, black is great, but you know what? There's a lot of colors.
There's a lot of colors. And in Arizona, there are less uncomfortable colors.
That's right. Exactly. It's, chances are it'll be in the heat. So, dress comfortably.
It brings up an interesting question, I think, which is, where did your, unless you have more stories of woe you'd like to set the table with, because we can build off of more.
Plenty.
Yeah.
These are the cards I lay on the table now. It's now you can have control of your show back.
Well, I want to map your current experience with these back to your experience growing up, right?
Sure.
Do you remember your first sort of lessons of death?
It was not something we ever talked about in the family. Like I come from a Nordic tradition, a German, Norwegian, Swiss, even it turns out, as my sister's been doing genealogy, and we are a Stoic people who don't talk about uncomfortable things. So we're farmers. We die in the fields. And you don't complain about it, you just keel over it. Mm-hmm. So there was not a lot of conversation about that. And I think the first major close death that I had was my grandmother, my father's mother died when I was in college, and that was the one because that was we had my family had moved away, so they were that side of the family, actually both sides of the family, were people I only saw at Christmas, and maybe once in a year. We lived multiple states away, so they were only sort of the Christmas people. So it was still, of course, it was my grandmother, and it was still sad, but it was not. It was someone I had by that point had met 20 times. It was sort of more just like more of a picture on the wall than an actual real person. So, and it was sort of going through this procedure of like in sort of Lutheran, which is what I was raised. You basically don't really show emotion. Like you basically they have a service that you go through, and you follow the motions. You sing the hymns. You say I'm sorry for your loss, and you go to a potluck. That's
Sure.
That's the tradition. So there was never any talk about sadness or grief or any of those kind of things. And so it was sort of not encouraged to be openly crying or sad. This was sort of the unspoken rules of this. It's just another thing you do. You just show up, you do this, you leave, and get on with your life.
Yeah, reducing the process of losing someone to a performative exercise.
Yeah, it's just like basically like they literally give you a script. We're gonna talk here. You're gonna sing this song. When I say these words, you say these words back. You're gonna sit and listen to someone talk for 25 minutes, not about the person who died. Then we're gonna sing this song. Then you're gonna say these things. Then you leave.
Yeah.
Like follow the script.
Right.
As I got older and sort of learned, oh wait, suppressing your emotions for a long time is a really bad thing, that I would find grief would come out in the strangest places. It was once I became a father and everything, and sort of like my entire chemistry got rewritten. Like becoming a husband was one thing, becoming a father was another thing. It was like these complete changes, and these things would hit me, and I couldn't figure out what it was. Why this affected me? There was two, and honestly, as we're podcasting, I might end up tearing up just because whatever reason, two things come back to me completely out of the blue that hit me so hard. There was in New Zealand, they have a tradition called a haka. So there's multiple hakas that you do. It's sort of a ritual war dance. But it can, as I've learned, it can serve many different functions, and there are multiple ones. A soldier in New Zealand had died not in combat, but just to a random thing. And when they brought him home, his squad performed a haka for him. And there's again, I don't know why it got me. I'm not from New Zealand. I have no connection to that. But something about that hit me so hard, and I felt such grief and emotion about it. And I was like, why that? Why? I was like, I've never really dug too deep to figure out what it is, but something about that, honoring the dead, that this was someone who meant something to these people, and they were showing this respect, this war dance essentially, but also it means a lot more in the culture, and like, which once again, not my culture, but something about that just, in fact, and I just was bawling about this person I never met before. There was the first black actor to ever play Jean Valjean, and he had it was a big deal. This incredibly talented young guy, and he was the first one, and he did a Ham for Ham. So Hamilton did shows, and they would get people from other Broadway shows to sort of hype them up too, because Hamilton was the hot thing, but they used their influence to try and build up other shows. And he came out and did a thing with Lin Miranda, and I thought it was fantastic. And like, I think within 6 months, found out that he had fallen out of a window and died.
Goodness.
Whatever reason, like, of all the people that you hear about, all these these deaths too soon stuff, like that one hit me, and I was just despondent. I was just bawling about it, and once again, this was due to me. Like, this is the first time I'd like had that sort of like this grief, which I didn't know at the time, but that's what it was. But it was like, why him? Why that? I have no idea. But that was the first time that I started sort of becoming aware of it as like, oh, death and sadness, like, and pain and grief. Like, it's the wellspring of emotion that suddenly like springs forth, and you don't have any control of it. And so now here I am, and I'm feeling this, much more than I expected to, and now sort of like trying to, like, step back and look at what's happening, but also still not disassociate, not try and let it pass. So yeah, yeah, it's just grief and death is so odd, and
Yeah.
and that we don't talk about. So I think this is what you're doing is fantastic, because I think it's something that we need to talk about, because so much of what we do currently is put under the rug, sweep it away, move on.
I think what, and I'm far from an expert on this. And I do want to say, I want to say something interesting that I take it back. I don't know if this is going to be interesting, but I want to say something to you because of something you said to me that hit me a little bit sideways, which was you instinctively, I think from a place of respect, attempted to diminish the experience of your grief with Eric and Mark by deflecting that on me because I lost my father, recently. And I just want you to know I would never diminish that relationship, because a death is a death, and you will be surprised by how that grips you by the throat in ways that are vastly unpredictable. And it doesn't matter if they were blood relative or work kin. It just doesn't matter, because grief is grief. And the stages of grief are not stages at all. That is a lie on the tin. It is it's essentially Jeremy Bearimy, right?
That's a perfect way of saying it. Yeah.
Does not move in any sort of linear place. You'll feel like you're at acceptance, and you'll be driving down the road and you'll hear Kenny Rogers and Dolly Parton, and you will be angry again, and then you'll be bawling again, and it's just because of reasons. And I think that's important, because what you are describing is the process of both coming to understanding what grief is, but also that there are words to describe it. It's not a mystery, and it doesn't have to be a mystery. You can actually call it what it is. It's not Voldemort.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for that. I appreciate the honoring of that, and that this is the lesson I'm learning. I mean, this is sort of what I and that's part of it is to know it is a feeling is a feeling. Like, you don't to rank it.
Right. There's no ranker page for this. It's a fascinating way to start this conversation, because and to start this conversation, we're now a full 30 minutes into. I want to turn attention to your creative work, because I find it fascinating, and as you know, I'm legitimately a fan.
I can count on one. I can count on one hand, essentially. There are people who are friends of mine, but I'm lucky enough to have a wide array. But there are only about 5 people I think I say are actual like fans that I know.
Yes.
So you are that are both.
Yes. Consider me a one-hander.
Yes, you can pick the finger.
It sounds awful now that we're really plumbing the depths of this metaphor. I'd like to stop and ask you some questions about stories and how you create stories. And because I feel like there are stories that arrive, with a whisper, and others with a brass band. And I'm curious how you catalog your work in that regard, the things that motivate you, the things that come to you from that wellspring where you say, I have to write this story right now, or I'm going to go into a stage of suffering?
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting that nothing ever arrives in the same way. So it's that thing of sometimes it literally can be, I have A, I have B, I have C. Now it's a story. Like I just literally just have things like the essentially Swashbuckling Ladies Debate Society, which is sort of my longest running thing, did not come from a place of I want to tell stories about marriage. Like I want to tell stories about swashbuckling women. I want to tell it literally came from what do I have? And I had two actresses that I thought were amazing. And one, and so I'm like, oh, okay, maybe I should make them a couple so that they are then talking to each other. So that was what it was. I had a podcast that we had started, so I had access to that. That's why it's an audio podcast. And then I one of the actresses is a French teacher, so she can speak French. So that's why they're French. It literally was that A plus B plus C. It was like, it was opening the crayon box and going, what colors do I have? Oh, that's what I'm going to draw with. Because
that's so it's crazy to hear you say that, because the show has such an identity, right? It has such an ideology. It's remarkably progressive, right? You're writing these strong women characters. You're writing about marriage. I would suggest that the trio, you're also writing about parenting. This show seems to have found its progressive bent through a bizarre sort of backdoor of necessity.
Yeah, that's what's that fascinating to me is like it seems so mercenary. It seems so like, and yet it has created and it allowed me to do all of this amazing stuff. Like you're talking about getting to talk about parenting and getting to talk about marriage and relationships and the complexities of sexuality and even death. In the last season, there's an episode where the characters are facing death. Which I didn't really expect that I was going to be talking about, but then it happened, and I was embarrassed. I was ashamed of that episode. When I finished the script, I was like, "This is maybe the worst thing I've ever written." But the machine must be fed, and multiple people have responded so strongly to it that it just shows I don't know everything. But then sometimes an idea will actually just arrive fully formed and go, here is the beginning and middle and end. All you have to do is put on all the stuff that goes in between it. It's a fascinating process. And then sometimes an idea arrives that clearly was the address was mislabeled, because I was like, this is not for me. Why did this arrive? I have a movie that would be absolutely fantastic and I think would people would love, and I am not the person to write it. But I'm just like, why am I holding this? Like, please, someone.
Kyle, there are a lot of people who would say, after they look at you, see a picture of you, hear your voice, and say, you are not the guy to write Swashbuckling Ladies Debate Society. And yet, right? And yet.
Yeah.
So this was another backdoor on my part, way to get you to talk about death again. Because that season finale had characters confronting death. And I also, again, I reiterate, it's too soon for you to make any, statements here.
Yeah.
But I know that as a creator, we are the amalgamation of our experiences, right? The collection of many experiences. And I am curious if, on reflection about that episode, you think any differently about it, disregarding all of the praise that others have shown to it. Just today, does it change the way you look at it, having gone through the experiences of the last 3-4 weeks?
I think that I was ahead of myself. Like I was I look back at it and go, oh,
the call was coming from inside the house, for sure.
Yeah. The times where I sort of look back and I go, oh yeah, I was. I have a play that I have written called 1,000 Betrayals, and on the surface it is about a older mentor, a screenwriter who is helping a younger screenwriter, and it's sort of a five-hander. The idea is that, like, that they're meeting up, but also you get to see what they're writing sort of played out in front of you, and it's comedy, and it's dirty, and it's adult, and it takes some shots at Hollywood stuff too, but there also was another thing. I was like, oh, this is also about death. Like, I didn't realize it when I had done it, but it was another one of those things where I had heard, and it's sort of like, it's not a twist ending because it is just the ending, but there was a story I had heard of a particular person, how they faced death, and I thought, like, just one little tidbit of their overall story that I thought, it just struck me, and I was like, oh, if I could like show the circumstances that led up to that moment, I think I could have something amazing. And for my impression, it worked, and I was like, okay, so that's good. I've written my death play, and I set off to the side, and I went on. But then, as I look back, there was like 3 in a row that were about death, and I did not realize it until I sort of went, oh, I'm in a cycle.
This is the death cycle.
I honestly
Kyle
have a
Olson.
death cycle. I'm like, I'm writing a play right now that's about death, and there's another one that I have like the rough sketch of, that is also, and I was like, huh, okay, so and this was all sort of before. This is last couple of years, like, and I was like, okay, maybe my brain was getting ready.
Well, we are men of a
of
certain
youthful-
age, Kyle.
We are of a certain
and
age. That is absolutely true. It's coming closer and closer. Sort of, it used to be that, when celebrities die, you're just like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
what are you going to do? And now there are people who are our age, or people
Younger.
that meant a lot to us,
Yeah.
or younger, that are happy, and then it sort of hits you in a different place. It would have been like this. One of my heroes is Howard Ashman, and it was his 75th birthday last week, and it was I sort of in the morbid way, I looked it up and I realized he never got to be as old as I am now, and I was like, ooh, like, he did so much and still continues. Like, there are shows on Broadway now using his lyrics. There are movies in theaters using his lyrics now. I just went to see a revival of one of his plays with lyrics, Little Shop of Horrors.
Yeah.
And he never got to be as old as I am now. And it's so sobering now. Sometimes it fills you with despair, and then sometimes I think legacy, like, his work lives on. And as a creator, as a writer, as a person who's putting stories together, that's what you want. You want your stories to resonate now so you can experience it, and you want them to live on beyond you. I don't want to say children because I have children. They're not the same thing. But that's the buffalo inside the cave that you want to have something that people can go back to and go, oh yeah, look at that.
But how do you define, in terms of a legacy, what is enough?
Yeah, that's when I found that when I think about hang up the pen, like when I get despair about where I'm at and where I think I should be, and what I should, I should be rich and successful, and everybody should be coming to me and let me write all the movies and stuff too. I get down on myself sometimes, but then, as you talked about, joyful and prolific, those are the two things. So those are the two things I have always strived for. So it means a lot to me that you notice that, because I want that spirit of life. I want that joie de vivre in all my things that you read, no matter where it hits you. I want that feeling of life, and I made the decision very early on that I wanted to be prolific. I didn't want to be J.D. Salinger and have one work that everybody goes, that's it, you're done, like, you have it, you finished it. I didn't want to be J.K. Rowling. I didn't want to have just like a singular thing that's it. I wanted to try all the different things, and like I said, wide, not deep. That has sometimes worked against me because I've tried a bunch of different things and not all of them have worked. But for me, it's the continuing on, like, always the next idea is always. And I got a chance to meet one of my heroes, Terry Pratchett, before he died, too young as well. And someone asked him, "What's he at that point? He is he was the number one biggest selling author of all time. At the time, near the time of his death. Unfortunately, it was that title was taken him by Joanne. And so someone asked him, of all the books of the 60 whatever books that you've written, what's your favorite? And he said, the next one. And that's what I always think of like, yeah. Sometimes my writer friend and I refer to it as the new shiny. Like you're something, and there's always the new shiny idea. But it's always that thing. You have to be in love with it. So you're always just thinking about the next one. And I sometimes forget that I have this sort of catalog that I'm building up because I'm always thinking about the next. But now, actually, part of this process, I have stopped a little or slowed down a little bit, and then turned around and sort of am now looking back through sort of what I had done. Pieces of what can this be something else? Can this be finished? Can this be tightened up? I've sort of started looking more that as opposed to the new. I've sort of started looking back in the warehouse, in the museum, whatever you want.
Indiana Jones,
yeah, exactly.
Raiders of the Lost Ark,
dusting
warehouse.
Stuff off, and
is that an act of deliberate creativity or an exercise in nostalgia? Do you think? What motivates that?
At this point, I think it's more the former, because I don't. I mean, there are stuff that has never been read that should never be read. There was a couple. I remember driving across the desert and having all the family coming back from a trip and having hours of just they're all sleeping and me just alone in the desert, and I came up with the most brilliant idea for the most brilliant show ever, like this amazing play that everyone was going to love. I worked out every single beat of it, and it was poignant, and it was serious, and it was about America, and it was about freedom, and and I sat down and wrote it, and it was 40 pages, and it was dead. I did everything. I poured everything onto it, and I went, oh, that was it. It's like, wow, this is pretentious and short and boring
and enough.
Yeah. And it just quietly put it in the drawer, and it'll never see the light of day. It's just not worth anything. So not everything that I've written is a beautiful and fantastic and wonderful and a lost gem that has yet to be appreciated. So, but I'm now sort of giving myself as I'm in pause, because really right now it's really hard to make something new. I'm finding it very difficult to like have people have the characters talking about whatever, but I'm finding it much easier to look back and fix things and to go, oh, that's not what she would say. She would say this. Like, oh, it was interesting. I had a play that I had written and sort of forgotten about, and then during this process, it was like my inner editor sort of tapped me on the shoulder and went, this is actually a story about a girl learning about her father. And I was like, oh my gosh, it is. And I'm like, I have to change. I had no idea. I had no idea. And then it was sort of like in this quiet moment that I was like, oh, that's exactly what it is. And I'm like, now I see all the pieces I have to change. So yeah, it's great works are never finished. They're abandoned. So that's part of it too, is going back and trying to make it into something.
That's an interesting pivot too, because it's, there is an act of agency that comes with being able to let go. And sometimes the impetus to let go comes from rejection or a perceived sort of external failure. Sometimes it's an act of recognizing that I wrote 40 pages of pretentious patriotism in the desert, and it's time to let go.
Yeah.
But you, by definition, as a prolific creator, have to have come to a place of reckoning about rejection, whether it's your own internal rejection or it's the rejection of others of your work that you've submitted elsewhere. Can you talk just briefly about how you come to terms with, and I'm going to make an assumption only because I know I'm not good at it, so I have to assume you are, of letting go of the rejections that come in as a creator?
Yeah, that is something that it may even be worth a, a whole episode to go on to. How do you deal with that? Because I've recently had a rejection too, and I had to be like, oh, and part of it is taking the thing of maybe this was the wrong audience. Like that's part of it. I've had a lot of time of like, oh, in a recent case, it was like I was once they explained to me why they were not interested. I was like, oh, it was never going to work with you. Like this is like it's sort of a misunderstanding of what it is that they wanted. I was like, oh, okay. So I take a lot of solace in that of like, okay, maybe this is the wrong audience. And so there are a couple things that I've done and finished and thought, yeah, that's it. And then it turns out they were not what I intended, what anyone really wanted. But there are most of the time when I have something, I kind of just take solace in the fact that it just hasn't found its audience yet. There are gatekeepers and there are people who are like I'm not for all tastes. Like I've heard people who have like just like have just said something, not necessarily cruel, but just like I remember writing a mystery thing, and someone read it and went, yeah, the mystery was bad, but the rest of it, and I was like, okay.
I mean, the mystery was like, the point, but okay,
yeah, exactly. I was like, okay, all right, but I was like, okay, but
how does it hit you though? Inside, because you are letting yet carry a lot of water in that conversation.
Yeah. I wish it didn't bother me as much as it does. I mean, okay. I wish I had a thicker skin because what we've like on our other show on which people haven't heard probably at this point, but we talked about Stephen King and his pile of rejections. I don't have a pile of rejections because in the 21st century, you don't get any response at all. And
it's either yes or nothing.
Right. It's either yes or nothing. And honestly, the nothing is what hurts.
Yeah.
I will happily take a no. As much as it sucks, as much as I still feel the tightening of my gut, and like, how could you not recognize that I am the most brilliant special boy that ever lived?
Yeah,
and no one can put words together like I can. I still have that, but I get over that.
Yeah,
it hurts. Honestly, it still hurts. But that heals. But the silence, that is it's just like being dragged across the desert. I mean, it just never heals, and it always
it's a signal that you don't exist.
Yeah,
to somebody, you don't exist. Your value is null.
That is for me, that is more painful.
If someone were to find a box of your work in 50 years and try to understand, right? Try to do what we do about movies on other shows of filmmakers who have long passed, who try to understand the story behind the storyteller, the context of the time. What do you hope they'd find?
When I was first starting out, I wanted to be clever. And so all of my early stuff they're sharp-witted and these quick turns of phrase and all of these funny little things, and I was so wanting to be like everybody, to be like, ooh, yes, wow, ooh, that's so innovative, what a brilliant idea. And then as I sort of continued along, that became less interesting to me, and the humanity became much more interesting to me. And finding, I still want to be clever, and I still want to be smart, I still want to be funny, but honestly, if I don't have the emotionality connected to it, it doesn't mean anything. So that's when I talked about like this older story. Oh, there was no heart to it. That's what I realized. Like it was just a series of events that happened, and now having that emotionality. So anything I look at, I hope that they see that I write stuff specifically that actors will enjoy and have a chance to do and sink. And I've gotten that note from several actors that they like. You really give us something to sink our teeth into, which is a high mark of praise for me. But that there's always a feeling of an exploration of the human condition. I know that sounds pretentious, but basically, I want there to be real heart in everything, whether it's a dirty, nasty, vile heart, or a higher aspiration. Why don't we just be nice to each other, all the way along? But that there actually is a real feeling to what I do, and it's not just about whatever the big idea of the thing is. Like they actually get. You feel even if you're not in the same place as that character, you understand what it is that they're doing. You feel the humanity of them, whether you agree with their decisions or not, that you actually have something. So it's not about shock for me. It's not about tearing open your heart and bleeding all on the stage and stuff too. It's about that looking at different people and how they emotionally connect and disconnect with each other. So I'm hoping that anyone who reads stuff feels that humanity and that curiosity about humanity and the way that we talk to each other and the way we don't talk to each other and the way that we deal with each other. That is what I'm most interested in. I like to write clever dialogue, but I also am very much about what it is that they're not saying, and I hope that comes across.
Clever dialogue is about right now, right? The equality, exercises in equality and agency and purpose. That's the stuff that sticks. That's the stuff that makes the stuff that you're writing worth reading today and in 50 years. I think it's lovely. I appreciate that. Now, I mean, we have to get to the big question. We've talked about very recent experiences of death and grief and the exploration of the ceremonial part of human ending. We've talked about, your work and your writing and your rejection and love and loss. And we've danced a bit about parenting. After all that, what do you want on your headstone?
I have had an answer to this question since I was 16.
No, you have not.
I have.
Seriously?
I have it. And actually, it was 3 words, and now it's 4. The 4th one got added when I met my now wife. So yes, I've all along. So like this is once again, I continue to surprise you in that before you even thought up this idea, I already had my epitaph ready.
For a guy who says, I am not deep, just wide. And you've been mulling over your headstone since you were 16. Okay.
Yeah.
I believe all that you've said. Wink.
Yes, my thing under, name and hopefully a date far in the future. It's 4 words. It's seen, heard, known, loved. Honestly, that's something I've kept secret. Like I've kept a long time. So now I'm sharing that, and I'm as I've reached sort of the halfway point, if I'm lucky, approaching 50, I have become a lot more generous with that kind of stuff. So like if somebody uses it, okay, great. If you feel it, use it.
Yeah. Well, it's lovely, and it's earned right now. I don't even need you to leave this place to feel those things about you, dear friend. I really appreciate you doing this with me.
I appreciate you giving me sort of a chance to talk about stuff. I'm used to talking about Marvel movies or making up silly ideas and stuff too, but I don't get a chance to talk about these kind of things. So I appreciate you sort of letting me you sharing, as I sort of spread my grief around a little bit. I hope you didn't mind getting sort of caught in some of the blowback.
Hey, the ground is fertile all around. Legacy is a funny thing. We imagine it as something cast in stone, permanent, declared from the mountaintop. But more often, legacy is a whisper passed hand to hand in the people we help, in the stories we tell, in the quiet moments someone remembers us for something we didn't even realize we gave. Kyle talked today about two men, one who gave him his first big break, the other who worked beside him through the grind of the day-to-day, and what it felt like to say goodbye to both. Neither of their funerals told their full story. But Kyle just added a little bit more to it. And maybe that's the point. Maybe legacy isn't what gets chiseled into granite, but what gets passed along in a podcast, in a play, in a joke, or a scene that suddenly makes someone feel seen, heard, known, and loved. That's 4 words. That's a life. And if you're lucky, it might be yours too. Thanks for being here. Thanks for your time and your attention. Until next time, tell your stories, hold your people close, and don't wait for the funeral to say the things that matter. And I'll see you down the road, sitting around the headstone.